Good evening. Thank you, Ms.Smith, for allowing me to record this real quick. I know I really appreciate it for trying to help my grade. My informative speech is on Malcolm X, who is a great African American civil rights activist. Um, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. When I was younger, and we always had church plays on important civil rights activists, I always sought out the role of Malcolm X. I had fixed fascinations with Malcolm and his background and the fact, like many other civil rights activists, he started off with the same youth, with a mother of more than two children and a Christian background, and due to his father being a pastor, but that didn't stop him from living a life different than the church he grew up in. So today I'm going to give you a brief walkthrough of the becoming of Malcolm Little to who we know and respect as Malcolm X. The early childhood of Malcolm X: he was born May 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. He is the son of Louise Little and Reverend Earl Little. Reverend Earl Little was a Baptist minister. When he was an infant, Malcolm's family relocated to Lansing, Michigan, which is about, I think, an hour and a half from Ypsilanti. His father died at a young age after a support rally of a black minister named Marcus Gravy. Died after being hit by a streetcar, quite possibly a victim of the he was quite possibly the victim of a murder by whites, as Malcolm X's mother, Louise Little, was a poor widow and resorted to cooking and tending the dandelion gardens from the streets to feed her children after she was committed to a sane asylum in 1939. Shortly after, Malcolm and his 7 other siblings were sent to foster homes to live with family members. Sorry about that. Rebellious years. Malcolm X excelled in school, but while in the English grade, while in the 8th grade, While in the 8th grade, his teacher told him that he should become a carpenter instead of a lawyer. That was a turning point where he lost faith in formal education, because that's kind of downing for someone to tell you what you should be instead of what you dream to be. From becoming a rebellious youngster, Malcolm X moved from Michigan to detention home and then finally to the city of Boston to live with his half-sister. There he had a petty criminal background, activities in his teenage years that peaked. He then took on the name Detroit Red and came into the play for his reddish ting to his hair, because they used red dye perms back then, so it gave it like a red tint whenever he would get a perm. He developed into a street hustler, a drug dealer, and the leader of gangs and thieves in Roebucks and Harlem in New York. While in prison for robbery in 1946 to 1952, he underwent the conversion of Muslimism that eventually led him to join the Nation of Islam. Malcolm quit smoking, he quit gambling, and he refused to eat pork, in keeping with the nation's dietary restrictions. In order to educate himself, he spent long hours reading books, reading dictionaries, memorizing dictionaries, learning the white meaning of a word and what a black author would have wrote for the word and what it actually meant. In order to educate himself, he furthered what he left in the 8th grade. Following the nation tradition, he replaces Sir last name Little with an X, a custom among the Nation of Islam followers who considered their family names to be originated with white slave owners. He had met Elijah Muhammad in Chicago of 1952, and then he began organizing temples for the nation in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and other cities in the South, such as Atlanta, Jacksonville, bigger populated cities. He founded the Nation's newspaper for the Nation of Islam. Muhammad Speaks was the title of it. When he printed, it was first printed in his basement of his home, and then it kickstarted into something much greater. He also articulated the nation's racial doctrines on the inherent evil of whites and natural superiority of blacks. Elijah Muhammad, who had a special affection for Malcolm, named him the national representative of the Nation of Islam. Malcolm's brand, his relationship with the Nation of Islam, it claimed more than 500,000 members, which was the biggest growing population at that time. Malcolm urged followers to defend themselves by any means necessary, unlike Martin Luther King's Nonviolence Act. Malcolm was the total opposite. He was all for, if you have to die behind what you believe in, just go for it. Do what you have to do. February 21st, 1965, Malcolm was assassinated while delivering a lecture. Malcolm X was assassinated while delivering a lecture at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem. 3 members of the Nation of Islam were convicted of the murder. Some say it was planned assassination to get rid of Malcolm because he was coming bigger than the Nation of Islam. We really don't know till this day. In conclusion, Malcolm X once said, "Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those we prepare for it today." Malcolm X wanted to educate the country on the racial differences that were being conducted in America, all while being a believer of his faith and his morals. Malcolm X grew the Nation of Islam from 400 members alone while he was in prison to 400,000 members by 1960. During this time, tensions between African Americans and Muslims countries were at a low because people like Malcolm X, he had the bond and the connection, and people actually understood them a little bit more. After Malcolm X's assassination in 1965, his best-selling book and the autobiography of Malcolm X popularized his ideas and inspired the Black movement as we know it today. Thank you so much for this.